mean, let's at least go live, and let's have just a loose chat at the moment until this is fixed, so people don't have to wait unnecessarily long. So, okay, I will go live now. Okay, and we are live at the moment. Let's switch to my camera quickly. And yeah, guys, we have some technical issues. Steve's camera is not working, so we decided to go live nevertheless at this point and just have a loose talk at the beginning until Steve has figured out his camera issues. You saw it in the description already, I guess. We have Tim Stanfield as a guest again. We had him here a few months ago. Talked about a lot of stuff, and yeah, he has some new topics he wants to talk about with us, especially the future of FPV from his perspective. Yeah, who else is here? As always, we have Darren Lyons in our call, who will be our technical INAV geek specialist when we talk about the when we talk about INAV 5.0. I mean, you have basically made half of the changes that are in INAV 5.0, so or in the configurator.
They're only little things.
Only little things. And of course we have Luke here, our drone expert and speedwing flyer.
Yeah, something along those lines, I guess, maybe.
So yeah, who's in? Yes, oh, Steve is here.
I'm here. Yeah, I'm going to be the voice of God today. So, you can hear me, but you can't see me. So I'm sorry about that. For whatever reason, I'm having an issue with my just the video camera, but the audio works fine. So I really wanted to, I'm sorry about that, but Tim, I really want to thank you for being here today.
No problem at all. Glad you guys had me. I appreciate it.
And if you could do like really long segues where you talk for about 5 minutes at a time so I can figure out my video problems, that would be really...
No pressure.
No pressure whatsoever. That's it. So we had you, I think it was a year ago today. And
was it that long ago? Wow.
Yeah, I thought it was Father's Day. Like we didn't know it was Father's Day.
Wow, has it been that long ago? It doesn't seem like it, but it might have been.
Maybe it was October last year.
Yeah, I feel like it was in the fall or something. Yeah.
Okay. And so yeah, we didn't want to go over the same issues or the same things over again, but kind of like a little recap, because you did a really good job of explaining what happened with the supply chain issues.
Right.
And has there been any changes as far as that's concerned?
You know, it's been all over the place and hard to predict. You know, different vendors are running into different problems. We had one, it's not INAV, but the Cube Pilot folks, you know, make the Pixot Cube and stuff, just hit us at the June 1st with like a $200 increase in the cost of their main cube. You know, just out of nowhere. And, you know, that's a huge increase. And it's purely because the chip they're using, they can't get without paying apparently close to $200 more just for the main CPU. They're making some changes. And I think that's really what's happening industry wide for anyone that's making flight controllers or anything that uses any of these chips that are in short supply, is that they just have to make adjustments because the manufacturers seem to be focusing on the newer generation or you know, whatever specific chips. So even if it's only a year or two old, if they've decided they want to focus on something else, suddenly the availability is just going to disappear and the cost is going to go through the roof. So we're seeing a lot of that, just price increases for lots of products every time we put in new orders. I saw already people were asking in the Facebook post about the planes, and there's still been a lot of delays with those, and we haven't started production. I know people, really? We haven't started production yet, but there's we're finally seeing some motion in the right direction now. As I mentioned the last time, supply chain, the market in general, it really put a lot of strain on everything. We're kind of slowly crawling out of that hole that the pandemic and everything else has put in, and I think finally we're going to see some movement here soon. Yes.
So last time a big part of the issue was the shipping. Have you seen any sort of positivity with that now that things have started to loosen up? Has it started trying to get back from the backlog, or has it costs come down or anything like that?
Interestingly, I literally just 5 minutes ago, right before we went on the chat, got an email back. I was asking one of our manufacturers if they had any updates on shipping prices, and what they quoted was less than what I had seen last time. So for a big full size container, it used to cost us $7,000 ish for a full container. I'd been seeing prices as high as $30,000 over the past year, but they just mentioned somewhere in the $15,000 to $18,000 range, which is a good sign. That means that something is loosening up. If they're coming down on price, that means that that things are improving. We've been working with some other vendors and trying to get smaller shipments in too that kind of work their way in the free spots of existing containers. That helps. The problem is that doesn't help us with our planes because we have to do full containers for those. But when it comes to getting in some of the other planes that we've been trying to get in, that's going to help quite a bit.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's positive, and hopefully maybe in another year's time, we'll almost be back to where we were, maybe as far as shipping goes.
I hope so. One of the bad things we're seeing is now our cost of shipping is going up just for, standard FedEx and UPS and USPS. The surcharges because of fuel prices have gone through the roof. I've seen some of the ground prices almost double, and it's almost all surcharges. So people put a plane in their cart and might see a really high shipping rate, and we're passing it through. And the planes are large, so they get dimensioned out to being fairly heavy packages. And I quoted one that was almost $80 for I can't remember which plane it was. It was one of the larger planes going to California. Just ground shipping was $80. It's crazy. So unfortunately, that's probably not going to go down until fuel prices go down, if they ever do that. But hopefully things will be back to normal at some point. But I see headway being made in general in the market. Again, people making adjustments to use different chips and different, just trying to work their way around the expensive parts. And they're so and I think that's going to be true with all the various INAV compatible flight controllers and stuff as well. So just go with the flow, right? And we'll just keep trying to work around it.
Yeah.
So you were mentioning that that the cost of shipping is the supply coming in from China, the container cost is going down as far as you can see, but the shipping costs are going up because of the cost of fuel.
That's my understanding. Yeah. And again, this is literally just one point of data from 10 minutes ago when I had asked a vendor, because we're working on an order for some other planes. And the pricing they quoted is lower than it has been. I don't know if that's across the board or if they just found a better source this time around. And we're also looking for other sources. Got to play a game sometimes with these different shipping companies, and they all contract the same ocean lines, but some of them have better deals than others. So you just kind of work your way through, try to find some good ones. But it's definitely lower than the last I had heard. I don't know if it's going to stick that way. You hear all this doom and gloom. It's hard to weed out a lot of it's just for news attention and everything else to try to figure out what's real and what's really going to happen in the market. But, and we're trying to work with, any company that's making new planes, we're trying to make sure they're aware if they make the things smaller, we have more shipping options, at least make the packaging smaller. And there's limitations, right? You can't break the wings into 20 pieces and, to try to make the box smaller. But that's really the driving factor for planes is the size of the box that makes them harder to ship and harder to get over here.
Okay, so that was one thing we were talking about with a manufacturer, and this was probably right before the pandemic, was they were mentioning that the cost of shipping the box, if it gets to a certain size, it like doubles. So that's why I think we're seeing a lot of these smaller planes coming into the market right now, because they are cheaper to ship.
Yeah, it's huge difference. I mean, it's, you know, all these carriers, when you're talking standard shipping, it's all dimensional. They charge a rate based on the dimensions, which work out to, you know, some of these planes will ship at the equivalent of 40 pounds, or translate to whatever real weight you guys want to convert to. But you know, they just, because of the dimensions, you know, the shipping carriers all realize that they take up space in their, you know, planes and trucks and everything, and they've all switched to that. So the smaller the box, it can make a huge difference on shipping. And yeah, we've tried to influence the manufacturers as well. Again, within limitations, you can only break a plane down into so many pieces, and volume of, you know, when it's foam, the volume of the foam is, there's a minimum you're going to get to. You know, and, you know, things like our Nano Goblin, we've been discussing here, you know, the essentially plug and play version. We had box, it essentially comes assembled, in a nice box to carry it in. And that's a really great feature, but we've been discussing here, like, you know, the massive difference in shipping between being that way. And if you've seen the kit, you know, it's a very small box.
I was shocked. I've had the plug and play and the kit, and the box different size is huge.
It's, you know, it's hard to justify, but then justify that difference in shipping and how much volume it takes up on a container. But it sure is nice and convenient to have a box to carry it in when it's assembled. I carry mine. It's not in here right now, but I carry mine in a box, in the factory box. You know, and it's nice to be able to get the plane and just throw your equipment in it and not have to glue things together and everything else. And but that cost of shipping is so drastically different that we're considering changing to just having what's essentially a lot of the Chinese manufacturers have been calling these plug and plays, or ARFs, when they're essentially just putting a kit in with the parts in the box. It's not really an ARF; it's just a kit plus parts. But you know, we're considering going that route just to save, and it's a little less convenient for the people, you know, that have to build it now. But it sure saves a lot of money on shipping.
I mean, you have even seen that process on ZOHD recently, when after the prices for the Titan GT and Dot XL went up to 300 euros or so, just because the shipping was not affordable anymore. They decided to completely disassemble the plane, every single part, nothing is glued together, so you get all the bits and pieces now in a smaller box, and the prices are down to what is it now, 120 euros or so, basically to normal prices.
Yeah, you know, we try to, you know, again, I would prefer to buy a plane that's just about ready to go right out of the box, so I don't spend so much time building. I enjoy flying more than I do building. You know, they both have their place, but, you know, I just want to go out and fly, especially now that it's a business. You know, I don't have as much time, so flying is what I want to do when I want to get out there.
I must admit, having the box was really handy, because, as you say, you just put your battery in, take it out, and throw it pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and the way the box is made, you can. I usually will have my goggle. I'll have everything in there except my radio.
Yeah,
in that box
at the front, the big compartments. But from a building point of view, one thing I found with the plug and play was that it was a little bit hard if I'm using a flight controller and stuff to get everything in, and the kit version, everything is just out there, so you can build it easier. But so there are two ways of looking at
pros and cons. Yeah, definitely. If you do a kit, you can run, you know, if you want to throw your GPS out in the wing, it's easier to run wiring out there. You want to put in something in the, you know, just, so much more room to work and build everything around your electronics. Yeah, there's that too.
Yeah. Because you basically build it with the top of the fuselage completely off. So everything's really easy to access.
More room.
But I guess also from your point of view, if everything is the kit and the smaller box, you could fit probably twice as much in there, if not more, for the same shipping costs.
Honestly, we could probably get at least 6 kits in the same space as one ARF, because, you know, you think of that size of that box, and, you know, again, the kits are only about this thick, and that box is this. You're talking, you know, almost a meter versus, down to, yeah, at least 6. I would say 6 kits.
That's a crazy size difference. It must make the chip. Yeah, it explains why the kit's so much cheaper.
Right. Again, the box was a feature that we're still discussing it. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, tiny box.
That is the Nano Goblin kit.
Yeah.
So it's tiny.
And in most cases, we can ship directly in that box. It's strong enough. It's got enough layers there to protect the items.
And I've actually got all my receiver, flight controller, FPV camera already in the box to build it. And that is the P&P stuff, the servos and the motor and everything. So it will all fit in.
I bet it's only a year or two away from building it, Darren.
Probably. I've probably had it a year. As soon as they came back in stock, I ordered it. That's how long ago I got it.
It's been a while then, yeah.
So it was before the Brexit crap as well, because I could order that without having to spend $200. So that's how long ago it's been. It's been a while.
Do you have any idea how many Nano Goblins go in a ship?
We all used. I don't remember if we did 500 or 1,000 of them the last batch. Containers hold a lot of planes. As large as the planes are, the containers are huge. Yeah. But we always wind up having a mixed with, usually they'll be multiple of our planes in addition to some other planes as well. We try to combine as much as we can into a single shipment if we can. Saves them, especially when they're 15, 20,000 or more for the shipping. Try to get as much as you can. That price of shipping doesn't change. It could be empty or full. Nothing we put in there is heavy enough to make a difference otherwise. So, So in general, we would have a full batch of the Nano Goblins, a full batch of the Stratosurfers, and we would get other planes pulled in from other manufacturers and consolidated into it. So XJV and Zod and various other manufacturers. We'd get all in one container. But generally, we have to do hundreds. Minimum quantities on most of these are 500, and sometimes it's 1,000 pieces, which is a big investment.
You're looking at least 3,000-4,000 planes a container, I guess. Then.
Yeah. Probably. Yeah, probably more like 2,000 total.
Oh.
Again, it depends. There's some of those bigger planes. You get those like the Skywalker X8s. Those things are massive. Things like that will take up a lot of room. Yeah. Our Anaconda, that usually that comes from a totally different part of China. So usually we get a small container, 20-foot container, and we can usually get just under 300 of those planes in one of the small containers. Okay. Those are large boxes. But yeah, and us making the essentially kits plus our packages or plus part packages is huge benefit to us when it comes to that investment up front. The cost of getting them assembled as plug and plays is astronomical compared to just the kits. So excuse me. So that's another factor too of just being able to get these things back in stock. It's going to be easier for us to do kits financially too, because we have to be careful where we're putting money right now. The market just changed a lot, and we've had to make adjustments. So,
yeah, that's kind of a good point right there, which is that you've got a recession potentially coming on right now,
right?
And so, as we're talking about the future of FPV, how's this recession going to affect with the supply chain issues, and also with the what people are, and the shipping issues? How do you think that's going to affect the hobby?
It's so hard to know. If there's reduced buying and spending, that could reduce shipping costs. But the market has always been all over the place, so it's hard to predict what that could do. People still like to spend money on hobbies, within limits. But it does tend to make people more frugal and want to buy maybe lower priced items, even more so than normal. So we have to keep an eye on that. But honestly, it's hard to predict. I don't even think the economists know exactly what's going to happen, and that's economy wide, and how it's going to affect the hobby itself is harder to tell.
Yeah, I kind of see right now that people are, and I can't really complain super much. Well, I can complain more than you can about the cost of fuel because I live in California, but I can't complain compared to what they're paying in Germany and the UK. So it's they pay quite a bit more than we do. But I'm kind of seeing that people, I think, are going to be spending more time around the house, in the next year or so.
And that might prompt them to fly smaller things that they can just fly in their backyard or, even inside if it's the small, quads and stuff.
Or go down to the local field, but they're not going to, they might not be taking the driving summer vacations far away like they normally would.
Yeah, and it affects travel to events and so forth. It looks like we're probably not doing FPV Fest this year. Just a matter of resources more than anything else. We planned on bringing it back next year though. And, traveling to things like that are a lot of fun, going to various events. CFL didn't happen fully this year, just a small gathering of a few people, the FPV meet in Florida. I don't know what events you guys normally go to, if you've seen any changes in attendance at any of them.
Well, coming up this next weekend here, we have Flight Fest going on in Ohio.
Yeah, that's right around the corner from us. It's about 2 hours away, hour and a half to 2 hours away from us.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to go this year because there's been a lot of changes as far as that community. I mean, it should be like nothing but good things for that community right now because everyone can get their hands on Dollar Tree foam.
Right.
But I don't know what's going on with there's they have some internal things going on within Flight Test, and so I'm curious to see how big of an event this is going to be. Plus, now at the cost of airfare, it's not $150, $200 to get out to Ohio anymore. It's more like $500 or $600, and that might affect who goes. And
you got to risk if your flights are going to get canceled or not. We had a vacation a couple weeks ago, and we're left on a cruise from Miami. But about 2 hours before we were going to leave for the airport, got a message that our flights had been canceled. And nothing was available. At a last minute, we had a road trip. That's a good 18-hour straight through drive from here to Miami, and made it, about an hour before boarding time on the ship. So, wow. People are flying right now. To me, I'm keep hearing about flights getting canceled. I don't know how it is over in Europe, but in the U.S. here, just daily, thousands of flights have been, or hundreds or thousands of flights have been canceled almost daily here.
There seems to be a lot of flights cancelled here too. I don't really get it because COVID isn't really a thing anymore here. I guess it's similar enough in America. So.
Yeah, they're claiming personnel shortages. I don't know if a lot of people retired early, because of COVID. I've heard that happen.
Yeah, part of the problem was that the before COVID happened, the industry had they were kind of at running. Remember when I forget it was a Boeing that had problems with the sensor, and if you didn't know how to fly them, I think it was the 777. It was the one that people were crashing in Africa.
737 Max.
737 Max. Yeah, yes.
Two of them.
Two of them, right? So that one, when they took the 737 Max out of service, it affected the industry. Like they were so reliant on just that new inventory to keep them going. And they barely had enough inventory. They barely had enough pilots. And what happened during COVID is a lot of these pilots who just retired, I'm done with it. I've got maxed out my pension. Let's just, go into retirement. And so that's part of it too. It's, I don't know. There's also other issues as far as just getting labor, and that's one of the big issues is labor in the United States. It might be things like getting the meals on the plane and things like that, where minimum wage jobs or cleaning, and so it does affect it. Oh, of course, ground crew maintenance, and it's there's a lot that goes into a flight commercially, so that might be it. To go back to the events and how that ties into that, you have people that have to pay more to fly. You have people that, RVs are extremely expensive now to take to events, whether you're pulling a trailer or driving a full-size RV. I mean, when we would drive an RV down to Florida years ago for an event, when we went down to, say, CFL, I mean, that trip
back when gas was only a couple dollars a gallon, still would cost us hundreds and hundreds of dollars to make that round trip. Now it would probably be $1,500 to $2,000 with the with the gas prices going up and how poor mileages RVs usually get. So I don't know though how it's going to affect things. Again, CFL just did a small casual thing with just just a few. There was no organization other than just come and fly kind of thing. I didn't get to go down, but Kevin did. We're going to go up to Flight Fest, not as we're not going to have a booth or anything, but just go up and fly. And just kind of hang out with people because, sometimes it's nice to be able to do that too. And, for us, it's only, like I said, it's an hour and a half, 2 hours away. So it's not.
Yeah, I hope the turnout's good. I mean, are you seeing that as far as the interest in the hobby, and is that waning at all, or is it about the same as it's always been, or is it maybe a bit more?
I think it waned, had been waning prior to the pandemic. But now I'm seeing it kind of changing again. And that's the thing. It evolves, people, and I think we talked about this before. You get people that come in a multi-rotor because they saw other people doing it. It's kind of got that cool factor. And then they, some will get bored. They get tired of crashing and preparing and all that. And sometimes they'll get out of the hobby, and sometimes they'll see planes and decide to get into planes. And they'll, so I think we reached the trough, the lowest point, really pre-pandemic, honestly. And I think the pandemic kind of held it, made it a little bit worse for a little while. But I feel like there's more interest in it. We see some STEM programs and some of the schools getting some interest in it that's bringing people in. So I feel like it's coming back, but it's changed. It's not the same as it was 3-4 years ago. I don't know. Again, and it also has something to do with our own interests. I still am more of a plane guy, so I don't spend as much time looking at what's going on in the quad area. I mean, I like it. I still enjoy it, but it's just not my main thing. So, so maybe I'm missing certain areas that might be growing just because I'm not as closely involved in it as I have been in the past.
And the one thing I would say, though, and something that you talked about from the last visit was the way that people take in, well, I mean, if you went back about 3 years ago, maybe 2017, 4 or 5 years ago, there were just so many planes that were on sale. I mean, the inventory was insane on the planes. They're always on sale. Come around Black Friday, Christmas time, always massive blowouts. And I mean, the consumption, it was just kind of like, oh, that looks cool. I'm going to buy that because, it's half off or something like that. And what I think that was there was a lot of excess capacity. What you mentioned last time was that a lot of these planes are made in the same factories that packaging is made.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that also, I know that with us, we changed some of our ways we were ordering products back then. You go back to, like you said, even 2015 was really the kind of peak, and it kind of leveled off for a while. But what changed is back then we were ordering super high quantities of everything, and because we just wanted to try to stay ahead of it. Well, what we learned is that the market is very fickle and changes their minds weekly, and you can get stuck with very large quantities of products sitting on a shelf that, even though they're perfectly fine, people don't want to spend money on them anymore. And that led to a lot of the big sales, a lot of the blowout sales, things that just needed to get them off the shelves. And it's made us, and I know the other vendors, I've talked to some of them, more careful about what we're buying, maybe more hesitant to buy volumes of products. But it also causes things to be out of stock more often because you're trying to judge what's needed and what isn't. So I do think that led to a lot of the blowout products that you're talking about, the sales and trying to get things just off the shelf. It's not doing anyone any good sitting here. And I know other companies doing the same thing. So now that stuff's exhausted and, it's a matter of rebuilding what people want, I don't think you're going to see from our standpoint, I don't think you're going to see the big blowout sales like that very often anymore, at least for a while.
Yeah. Well, what I was kind of seeing though also is that back in the day, I had some exposure to the packaging side. What would happen would be that people would, your factory would run an order, and it's kind of like gardeners for a good analogy. Gardeners, they get 6 hours worth of work, and then they have an extra couple hours. So every time my neighbor gets their garden taken care of, they come knocking on my door. Hey, would you like to work on the tree? We'll cut you a good deal because we've got a couple hours to kill right now. And I think that was what we saw that with the packaging manufacturers, and from that they're able to make the foam planes fairly inexpensively and offer less than full truckloads of stuff. But now they're like, man, we got so much business, we don't know what to do with it, and if you want to talk to us, we need full containers.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's very likely impacts it. It's one of the many factors that has an impact on this. So. Yeah. We've definitely seen a push some of that type of product that they don't want to talk unless you want to build. And so again, it puts us in that tough situation. Do we want to order 1,000 of something?
Right.
Or, at a now a higher price and risk that it's going to take a long time to sell it. So it's, and then we can see for us, from our standpoint, we see some products that as soon as we get them, they sell. So, we try to mix it up. We understand that people need everything to fly. You can't just have flight controllers. You can't just have cameras. But, we also have to try to get money turning around to keep money coming in so we have money to invest in new things and keep things going. So, it's a balance. It's a tough decision to make. Like I said, I feel like that we're heading in the right direction with a lot of this stuff, though. We're kind of seeing a recovery.
Okay.
So that's very positive, to the point that I've, been thinking, do we start up development on some planes that we had stopped or paused a few years ago? We're starting to talk about that. But our first thing is, when it comes to our planes, is we know that the demand for the Nano Goblin and for the Stratosurfer is there, and people just really want both of those planes. So those are going to be the first things that come back, and then as soon as those hopefully kind of increase money flow, then we can put some more money into some of these other developments. We'd gone through everything from considering, do we ask for investors to try to get things moving, because we know once these things are in stock, they're going to move. It's just getting over that hump and that long delay from when we pay for them to when we have them available. That's tough right now, or has been.
It could be upwards of 6 months before you place an order, before you actually have something on your shelves, right?
Yeah, especially with the supply chain problems. It puts a lot of risk there of putting that money that now can't be spent on anything else into that. We'd still considered asking again for investors. It's people that have capital, but you don't want to really go out necessarily and make a big deal out of that. But we think there's definitely some benefit there if anyone has that interest. But the big thing is I do see us, regardless, things improving to the point that we should be back. Honestly, we have potentially some stuff happening that would allow us to get this finally going here in the next few weeks. Mark?
Yeah, Tim, speaking of availability, there was a question in the chat before about the 1.3 gigahertz FPV receivers that are in back order right now. Do you know anything about the availability of them?
I do. There are some that are on the way to us right now. They just shipped, or were supposedly shipped at the end of the week. So these seem to all of a sudden be in higher demand. We're one of the few still making them, and we have our own custom version of it. So I think that's put us at a huge advantage. The companies that used to make them, they're based off of old cable TV tuner technology. So obviously a lot of that has faded away now that analog TV has faded away. But we have worked with a company that we've manufactured, that we've worked with for years. And they worked with us to basically develop our own version of it that's being manufactured just for us. So kind of bypassing the market that faded away. So, we're probably the only ones that have, I know that we're the only ones that have the ones that perform the way ours do. The other ones just don't And that's because even back when they were more available, we did a lot of work to make sure that they worked with our UHF RC systems and everything else. So, but anyway, yeah, they're underway. We're seeing high demand. So what we're getting and what's on the way, we have more on order, but may sell fairly quickly. So I would recommend, if you see them, grab them. But we have tons more. The turnaround time should be shorter this time around. They're already in manufacturing. So
before we get off the supply chain thing, though, the last thing I want to ask you about was flight controllers. And that, have you had problems getting flight controllers in stock?
Yes. Again, it varies. Maytech has been kind of our most reliable source, even though they keep surprising us with price changes and, phasing out one model for another. And generally that's probably for chip reasons. They don't communicate with us quite as much about the reasoning, but so it's been getting better, I think, but the prices have gone up on a lot of them. I've definitely seen that.
Yeah, I mean, Maytech's had issues getting certain parts of the flight controller, such as the gyros, and so that's why they would have to do model changes and things like that. And
and that's what we hear from the ones that do communicate with us, is that they just have to make adjustments and either change it on the specific model or completely phase out a model and come out with a new one. So
I mean, with that in mind, it's also a strange decision, but we have discussed that on Facebook already with Samson himself about the F405 WTE, for example, that the prices go up, the production costs rise, the components get more expensive, and what do? They use the main selling flight controller, the one that is in it feels like 50% of all planes with Maytech flight controllers, they have an F405 wing generation in there. And what do? They put extra electronic on that to integrate Express LRS or Wi-Fi. But yeah, Samsung already confirmed on Facebook that they are working on a second variant of that flight controller without the Wi-Fi and Express LRS, and hopefully the price will go down a little bit. Because
you'd hope so, because I managed to get an H74 wing, H743 wing for cheaper than that's the version 3, the latest one, for cheaper than the F405 WTE.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That's really crazy.
Like I mentioned with specifically with Cube Pilot, and they're raising the price of their main cube by $200.
Autopilot.
Yeah, I know. That's right. But it's the same problem, though. It's the processor, and they didn't. The thing
You've heard it here first, folks. You can't afford to fly autopilot anymore.
Yeah. Well, I stay neutral. No.
I mean, sorry, Tim. Let's be honest. On a Cube flight controller, we speak of a whole nother level of components and component quality that's in there. I mean, that's not comparable with any stuff from Maytech or whatever flight controller manufacturer.
Honestly, for us, the Cube stuff is mostly going to contractors, government work, things like that. But all right. I don't think they've officially announced. There is another version of their flight controller that's going to be out that will be back closer to the other price, and it's basically because it uses newer, better processors, but they're just cheaper. And not just processor, but the other sensors and everything. So I think that Maytech is running the same problem. They could develop something off of a newer generation CPU, and it might be cheaper just because the manufacturer of the CPUs have put all their energy into that, and so now you get dual core, whatever, stuff that we may not need that much power, but still might be cheaper to go with the next gen.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean Maytech is I was talking to Samson right as the prices started to increase, and he was trying to figure out everything he could to keep the prices down. So it's not like they really want to push the prices forward. It's not like they're making more money. And so, but yeah, there's the cube that you're talking about. That is kind of the way I understand it. Autopilot does work on some of the Maytech flight controllers. but the cube is really, if you want something that's solid, that's going to work, and this is mostly for government work anyways, or some high-end drone manufacturers, then $200 isn't really going to affect them all that much, especially when they're getting at least $10,000 per unit.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think it's the hobbyists that it mostly affect, because there still are people, you get that cube combo and it was $300 for the carrier board and the cube. It went up by $180 to $200, somewhere around there. That's a massive increase in that cost, and then it really takes it out of the hobby market, right? At that point, people that were, for whatever their own reasons, maybe weren't using INAV, now probably look at it, and maybe it's because of the early days INAV. Everyone's kind of nervous about it back then because it was, years ago it wasn't as stable, but now it'd be what I would go to. There's no way I'm going to spend that much to put in one of my planes, and I feel like INAV has more support and flexibility now. So, and
you also mentioned, or Darren mentioned, the H743, which is, I had a lunch with a bunch of guys who were pilots, and one guy was a big Ardu guy, and about the one thing we could agree on was that there's really no point of putting anything else but an H743 into something of value that you're trying to build.
Right.
It's
I mean, you want the most reliability you can get. I think, and that's one of the things that causes the cube stuff to be more expensive. Is there's a lot of redundancy in their stuff. So, it just that just costs more. But INAV and the quality of stuff coming from Maytech has really changed that over the past few years.
Yeah, and I think that's taken away a lot of the hobbyist market. I mean, somebody coming into the hobby could possibly spend $300 to buy one of their flight controllers. I mean, if you look, the Eagle Tree Vector was around that price.
Yeah, it was. We still get people asking for that too. But people
has
get
two for
familiar
sale.
With something. Yeah, there you go. You know what? There are people. We have government contractors asking for them. Like, they haven't been available for a while now, but they get set on a specific set of things that someone used 5 years ago, and they just want to keep repeating it. And like, none of that stuff's available anymore. We got to switch. You got to find something else. And I think that's why they've stuck with a lot of Cube Pilot. The Cube stuff is just familiarity and how it fits into whatever programs they're using. I've noticed some of the videos from overseas, Ukraine and so forth, the OSD sure looked an awful lot like INAV, some of the INAV OSDs. And we have seen pretty large amount of 1.3 gigahertz gear going to Poland, and some U.S. addresses with very Eastern European names. I think that people that are using our stuff for pretty advanced stuff, they're switching to INAV a lot too, I think, and surprisingly still, I think analog video as well with the 1.3, just because of the range and how well it works.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. I'm looking to see right now. Looks like we're at the right now we're about to break. How about we take a 3-minute break? When we come back, let's discuss. I remember last time we were here, it was kind of like we just asked you all a million questions about supply chain and the history of FPV and how things got started. And we've kind of fun to take you through one more time, just a brief recap of how things got started with FPV. And, I think what you mentioned was like, hey, I really just want to talk about the fun of just going out and flying and the passion of flying and everything else. So when we asked you to come back, it was really like, let's hit that this time. And let's also talk about what you see things going as far as the hobby is concerned.
Sounds good to me.
Okay. We'll be right back.
Okay, we are back.
We're back now?
Yep.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, guess what? I'm here. I'm so sorry about that. I don't know what is up with the camera. If anyone has any ideas, this isn't working. So it's a Logitech, and I tried unplugging and replugging it. It's we'll try it out and test it somewhere else. But I have a fallback camera, and we're back on. So I'm sorry about being just a ghost. And now you can actually see that I'm here. And we're back. Really, Tim, thank you so much for hanging in there.
No problem.
So I really wanted to ask you, let me just kind of recap what we discussed last time, which was you said that the way that FPV really started was people were taking the nunchucks from the Nintendo Wii, the gyros out of them and putting them into things that flew.
That was, the flight controller side of things. I think that's where we saw a lot of the initial movement. There were types of flight controllers before then. A lot of them had the potentiometers to adjust, various things with the gyros, all analog based, or just it might be digital, but not anywhere close to level of control. So you had that. When it came to flight controllers for video, you had people just ripping apart, wireless security cameras and taking that type of equipment apart and using things that existed, standards that existed to build up systems that were hacked together and then it evolved into here we have all these custom built products and things on the cameras have gotten better and smaller and video transmitters have improved. Now we have various digital options, which it's really just crazy to see how it's evolved in the 15 plus years since we saw the first. Well, honestly, longer than that, but 15 years since it really started to become more mainstream, I guess.
So what got you into the hobby in the first place? I know that you end up owning a hobby store or a major retailer in the hobby.
Yeah, for me personally, and I know it's different for everyone how they got into it, but I had always loved aviation since I was a kid. Never really got as far as I wanted to. Of course, I grew up in the era of the original Top Gun and, just around aircraft and, really wanted to be a pilot back then and just never did. And then I went into electrical engineering and was have that background. And my wife just for one birthday bought me just a cheap Hobby Zone, ready to fly kit. And my electrical engineering side took over, and I immediately decided I wanted to throw a camera on it and, wireless camera and start hacking stuff together. Found other people that were already doing it as well. And just kind of evolved from there. It kind of combined the stuff that I like with the electronics and that side of me, the technical side, with the fact that I liked aviation in general. That was probably, what did I say? It's like 2005, 2006, something like that. And it just evolved, and around 2010, I was selling a few things to make money to pay for the hobby because it was getting expensive, and started selling a little bit more, and just at that time was making my own pods that went on the planes.
Yeah, those 300 line cameras weren't cheap back then, right?
No, everything was way more expensive. Yeah. I started building stuff for people just to make some money, and then it grew, and I started sourcing more products and filling up the room I had in the basement with stuff, and it just evolved into, decided to make it a business for good and for bad. I'm really happy that I did, but it's not a hobby in the same way it was then. So I enjoy it, but it's different. It's not, it's less of a hobby. And now even when I'm doing stuff for myself, I feel like I need to learn and do things for the business, when I'm doing it, so but definitely can't complain. It's paid the bills now for 10 years and, or more than 10 years. So, just try to keep up with the changes too, fundamentally. I think that it goes with the people that are here too. It's like this hobby really has always come from the people that like to tinker and that build things, and so whether it's programming or whether it's electronics or whether it's the flying part, you got all these different people that enjoy different aspects, and they're really have created the biggest leaps, I think, or at least they prompted the biggest leaps, even if they weren't the main people that created it since it started. And you know, obviously now we have companies that manufacture stuff with a vested interest in building their own their own product lines and everything. So they'll have an influence on it, but I still think that the hobby is still driven by people like the INAV group, and where people they just want to spend time working on it, and they want to make it what they want, you know, and they enjoy that part of it. And I think that's what's important. You know, it's not work necessarily; it's fun, and that's why it grows as the way it does.
Yeah, there's kind of it's interesting. You know, I don't want to get too much into like where I came from, but I started about a generation before you did as far into the hobby. I bought a Zaggy, if you remember that. So that was the original foam plane. It was made out of styrofoam, and it had 1/4 of an inch of EPP foam on the leading edge. And you know, so it was $140 for styrofoam, and it came with packaging tape, colored packaging tape, and they had instructions, and I put it together, and after about 40 attempts of trying to get the thing to fly, I gave up on it, and it was hanging in my garage. And, you know, I had the old 72 megahertz transmitter there, and it kind of like, at some point it started to symbolize to me, this was all the failures I've had in my life, you know, things that I wanted to do. And that's kind of back to what you're saying here is like, when you start off when you come out of school, they're pretty much telling you what you're good at and what you're not good at. And as you get out of, when you're, you know, faced with every single day, like, I hate math, yet I have to go to a math class, or I hate science, I hate English, or whatever it is. Then when you get out of school, it's kind of like, do you really want to invest your time and effort in something you're not good at? And for most people, it's no, right? So what happens is that the hobby came to me to symbolize, this is something that I'm not good at. And that at some point I found hooked up with a friend I knew who knew how to fly. And I basically said, this is something I want to do. I suck at this. I can't get these planes flying. I need help. And that's something as a guy is very difficult to do. You know, to sit there and say, here's something I want to do. I can't do it. But the one thing I think it's common for all the people in the hobby is that at some point you are crashing planes. You are not good at this. You don't really understand what's going on, but if it's something that drives you, if it's something that compels you, you'll get better if you put your time and effort into it.
Yeah, I think that's key to this, is because you're gonna, I mean, as all of us have learned, you're gonna crash, you're gonna fail, you're gonna break things, you're gonna make mistakes. You know, we have a running joke. I think I may have mentioned this last time, is the people that come in thinking they won't make mistakes are the ones that make the most and biggest mistakes and blame everyone else.
Right.
You know, we literally have we have kind of a running joke, and it's funny because I am electrical engineer, but the first key that we have to knowing that the customer damaged their electronics themselves is if they say one of two things: I'm an electrical engineer, I know what I'm doing. Or I've been doing this for 20 years.
Yeah.
If they start out with either of those two lines, there is a 95% chance they broke it.
Right.
I worked in IT customer support for PC hardware for 3 years before I step up a few levels, and we had this exact same experience. As soon as the customer comes in on the phone and he says, yeah, this and this is not working, I have done all the tests, I do this so and so long, and I'm IT expert, and you know, they have done nothing, absolutely nothing, and usually it's just some minor thing. The craziest thing, there was a crazy story a few years ago, but unfortunately that was not my customer, it was a customer a colleague had on the phone. and he came in and said, your company has stolen me 4 GB of my PC memory with an update. It only shows 3 GB of system memory in my PC. You have stolen me. And he went furious, and he said, I am 25 years in IT. I know that you have stolen me my memory or disabled my memory with an update.
Right, can I guess what the issue is?
Yeah, go ahead.
He had a 64-bit operating system, and he put the 32-bit operating system on.
Exactly. He installed Windows 7 32-bit, and of course he cannot use 8 GB of memory anymore.
but he was sure that it was not his fault, and that
he was sure. Yeah. He was sure it worked before. He said he made a BIOS update, and after the BIOS update, suddenly he had no memory anymore.
I think that from the hobby, I think from the hobby standpoint, the people that are coming in most that are just they want to learn are the ones that are going to do the best. And yeah, sometimes people come in thinking they know everything, and they just don't learn. Then they get mad and frustrated, and then you see these arguments online about things that, you know, obviously everyone's an expert on everything, and you know, but the people that really have the most fun are the ones that know that they don't know everything, including me, including my wife. My wife would say that I maybe act like otherwise, but I know that I don't know everything, and you know, it's you know, and you just have fun with it. But I think that's what's driven most of these big changes in our hobby, though, is just people wanting to learn new things and, you know, trying to use skills that they like and stuff. And I don't know, it's and you know, it's developed, you know, flight controllers, everything from flight controllers to video and everything else. I worry a little bit when we get, you know, what led to the video aspect of it was open standards. You know, the analog video standards were well known and open for years. And, you know, I have a little bit of concern with some of the you know, I'm glad to see some development into the digital video. I worry about the proprietary aspect of it because it's really prevents that growth from people tinkering. I get why companies would want to do it. They want to sell, they want to put money into their stuff, and they want to sell it and not have someone else just take it and sell it. But I worry a little bit about that, you know, the standards not being as open.
So, sorry, I thought you'd finished. What do you think of the open sourceness of I'm going to get it wrong. HD0.
Yeah.
Which one of the 5 slightly similar names is it? Yeah, HD0.
I am not going to take any sides on any of these things because I honestly, it seems like every time I look at these, there's so many opinions and it's hard to figure out what's going on with all of them. And I will say that some of these companies that are coming out with some of these things have been very difficult to work with, and which obviously doesn't help, you know, us. You know, we need cooperation with them, just like, you know, we want to work with customers to make sure we're getting what you guys want. We need to work with these manufacturers, and some of them coming out of the gate like they know what's going on, and, you know, just making it hard for us to work with them. And some of them may have links to individual stores or individual groups of people that make it harder for us to want to cooperate because, you know, it's not in our long-term advantage necessarily, you know. And we try to work with people. We have no problem working with other companies, but if they're going to be exclusionary or, you know, it hurts the market if they're trying to lock it into specific vendors or specific groups of people. You know, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think, because, you know, it's tough. You know, we see, you know, stuff coming out recently, you know, the walk snail / fat shark side of things. You know, we have no information that the rest of the community, you know, we don't have any different information than the rest of the community has. I can just look at it as everyone else has and kind of tie things together based on things that we see. And, you know, I would agree with everyone that says that it looks like this is just DJI's technology being passed on to someone else so that they can continue to sell it. As in the US, there's definitely some more restrictions on working with DJI. Obviously, it sure looks like there's a connection to other companies that have been around for a while that they seem to be not wanting to talk about, and that really is what's frustrating. Is like, come on, just admit that it's the same thing, But we are literally we have no additional information. We were given information exactly the same time it went out to everyone else, and not given any other background information, which is kind of, you feel like we've been in this industry long enough, but
it was a messy launch, to say the least.
And even the information we're getting from Walk Snail versus Fat Shark, which we had never heard of Walk Snail either before this happened, and to see them advertising the goggles as well, it really, it's just strange. Yeah.
There's a question I wanted to ask you, and that is, since you've been in it since the beginning, when did the tribalism start with this hobby?
It's always been there.
Really?
To some extent. I mean, I look back at the earliest years, and it was just a few people on a really small forum that were doing the start, and it was Greg from Fat Shark and Anthony and Sander that were Immersion RC. We're heavy into that community. Mike from Dragon Link was in that community. I started seeing some division when you had, like Team Black Sheep back at that time were really kind of in everyone's face about doing stuff that was getting a lot of bad press for the community at the time. And, you had the people that loved it. You had the people that were like, you guys are, getting the attention of people we don't want to get the attention of. And I think that's where I started to see more controversy in the hobby, was right around then. But, I don't know what causes this tribalism, and it's frustrating from us because, we just want the best stuff, and we want to have what people want. We want to fly what's the best. And you see this just like, people just staking their ground and saying, this is the right thing. And we talked about, we go back to what we talked about in the last call with, the FR Sky and Radio Master. It's the same. It's similar. You get people with very strong opinions on either side of it. And but it's been, we aren't sure what to do with some of the newer HD stuff, honestly. And, we don't want to necessarily support one, even if we feel like some are being a little bit shady, because we know that there's a lot of opinions out there, and we can't just alienate half our market just because we feel, well, maybe these guys are a little cooler to work with than others, because people maybe just decide they want to use one product over another, regardless of our opinion. So,
I think the guys that might.
We can't hear you, Steve.
What?
Yeah, Steve,
you're real muffled.
I think your microphone has switched. Something is strange.
You hear me okay? Let's see. 1, 2, 3. Is it off? Is it off here?
Yeah. It's on webcam now.
Oh,
okay.
Wonderful.
Now you change that, and now I quickly want to jump in here with my point. I mean, most people, I think, also in the chat know how I think about DJI FPV. I mean, just in a. Darren shakes his head.
Oh dear, your opinions, Mark.
I mean,
yeah, opinions are great.
Just as a quick recap, what I think is that the whole DJI FPV system was just nothing more than a test bed where every tester paid for in public for DJI's OcuSync 3 low latency technology. What they actually now use in their latest camera tech stuff, for example, this Ronin 4D cinema camera with their remote controller that actually you see on the antennas and you see on the specification, it uses exactly that technology now. So the who else could test link reliability, link speeds, and link stability in harsh environments better than the FPV community? We fly outdoors, we fly long range, we fly in the woods, in cities, in buildings, in bandos, whatever. So that was like a big testbed for them, and that's why I think that DJI FPV system will in not too far future completely die out in the way it is right now. Just my opinion on that. And now we have Cadix that has licensed basically the DJI software, or is allowed to sell all the stuff. They do also the support, so they carry all the risk of it. There's this YouTube channel of sound is still the same. Steve. Still on the wrong camera. There's this YouTube channel, forgot his name. It's a little bit an elderly guy who does great review stuff. And he basically shares the same opinion on that Walk Snail, Cadix, DJI story. And at the end, I think Cadix uses the DJI technology, makes Walk Snail as a brand just to keep DJI out of the equation and do their own thing based on their technology, but without actually using their technology, because that's completely proprietary for DJI's business segment. And the biggest problem I have with all that Walksnay and Fatshark and Cadix thing is that these companies or brands, they straight out lie to their customers, and even after they are discovered to have lied. Like Walksnay is a brand created by Cadix. After that was found out, they cannot admit that they have lied. So and for example, 1.5 years ago, Cadix said, yeah, we are working on canvas mode for DJI FPV system. Now they were asked again, what about the canvas mode? And they said, hey, there's a new digital FPV system soon on the market that will have full canvas mode. So what's the truth now? So now they shift everything over to Walksnay, so they don't have to do it anymore. So they basically lied to us 1.5 years and didn't clear up that they won't bring canvas mode. And now
I agree that and the way that the Fatshark release came out, and the what appeared to be obvious lies about the technology behind it, I have my own suspicions. Steve,
we're getting an echo from you.
I've quickly muted him. Yeah, there was the echo, Steve. I've muted you. No worries.
So this is pure speculation. I think that a big part of the reason that they're what appear to be obvious lies about the basis of the technology, I think might have a lot to do with the U.S. The specific restrictions the U.S. has placed on DJI. If the U.S. aspect of now that Fatshark is owned by Red Cat or whatever, if they truly are working with DJI directly or with that technology directly, that is in specific violation of that U.S. trade restriction, which is specifically about cooperating with DJI in a technological aspect. In other words, DJI can sell products in the U.S., but U.S. companies cannot work with them on any technology. Again, this is pure speculation on my behalf, but if they've truly been working with them to come out with these goggles, they can't admit that, because they put them at a pretty severe legal risk. I mean, that's violating those trade restrictions, and those was it Department of Commerce or whoever put that out, is a huge deal in the U.S. But I agree. I mean, everyone started seeing through it immediately. The fact that they would blatantly say this has nothing to do with DJI, when there were so many obvious, software things in the software, things in the whole interface, everything is obviously DJI.
Yeah, they protest too much.
Yeah, exactly. They made it worse. It would have been better if they just said, you know what, it's based on the same. If they would have just said it's based on the same technology, I think it would have at least not been a flat out lie, you know.
And now the big problem that I see here, not only that they flat out lied to their potential future customers. I think there was a question to them by Joshua Bardwell to the Fetcher guy, who said, "Hey, what about the legal stuff?" Basically, he worked around that statement. That's not DJI. And then the guy from Fetcher, I think he said to him, "Yeah, the users are all fine. They won't have any problems whatsoever." But how I see is, now they finished their goggles, they finished their VTX. Let there be 10,000 FPV people right at the beginning, pre-order the goggles, pre-order VTX, pre-order cameras. They get that stuff, and then some authority in the US, for example, checks their hardware, and they find out, hey, that's DJI technology. That's forbidden. That's not allowed. You are not allowed to sell that stuff here. And then they cut them off. So they cannot do anything on the US market anymore, suddenly, from one day to another. And now you have systems there. People bought goggles, people bought their first VTXs, and now they cannot get any supplies anymore.
Looking at the way the restrictions are listed, my interpretation of them are that DJI and technologies based on DJI can still be sold in the US. So I don't know that it would go there, but it could affect Red Cat, Fat Shark, any of these companies, their ability to send stuff to the U.S. If it's determined that they were, and I don't know they were, but you know, I'm just looking at it from our, you know, the same point everyone else is, and kind of trying to piece things together. And it sure looks like they were trying to get around some of those rules, and it's difficult to know to what level the government really does want to follow through on that. Again, DJI is going to continue to come out with products and sell them in the U.S., and so far that hasn't been banned. But they're not that far off from it. So there's a risk. But, you know, at what point does it no longer DJI? I mean, if they're licensing, if they're paying DJI for these, then I would say the U.S. government's probably going to say it's still involved with DJI. It's just they're trying to get around that. But I don't know if they are. I don't know if they just got a flat, you know, we now have right to do what we want to with the technology, if they're actually paying some licensing fees. I got to be honest, I never felt DJI was really invested in our market in the first place. Especially, you know, we had the sales guy here, and their attitude was kind of take it or leave it kind of attitude. And they've always been that way, really, you know, one of the more difficult ones to work with.
That's what I meant before. They are not interested in the FPV market. Yeah. We are just guinea pigs for them to test their stuff and technology.
And I think,
honestly, why would they be when they can sell a $30,000 drone to some farmer for some kind of work, or for search and rescue or something, versus ours, that our market doesn't want to spend that kind of money. So yeah, I've never really understood why they even kept trying, but it makes sense that it would be to help them develop their technologies for their own equipment. Someone else is getting ready to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that really hits the nail on the head. I don't want to invest, however good it is. I don't want to invest, £1,000 on goggles, VTXs, and whatever, if it's not their primary, business plan, and they can just pull out and we're left stranded. I think even, companies like FreeSky or whoever who haven't been reliable in terms of, keeping their old products relevant, are still going to be better than someone who has no interest in keeping, their products going at all.
And that's the difficulty. You have companies that create a proprietary technology that works, and we want to use it because it works, right? I mean, I think digital FPV that really works well is something that we've all thought would come eventually. There are some open standards, and it's just they're not there yet. But as I mentioned before, and it was really kind of leading to this kind of stuff, is that the openness of the previous technologies that we all use were what helped create all this innovation. Right. But the thing is, that was standing on the shoulders of something that already existed. It wasn't like we were creating a new standard in the open market ourselves and building products around it. It was, so it's tough. I get that it's, like, we're not going to invest a ton of money in some new product if every other Chinese company or every other company is just going to start manufacturing the same thing and charge $5 less. The market does tend to forget a lot of times pretty quickly, who created things. They don't really care as long as they get something at a good price and get it, reliable. So it's a tough situation we're in right now when it comes to that. But I feel that an open standard that can be improved upon by the community is going to be the best for all of us. But it's just getting there, right?
Well, let's take a look at Apple, for example. And that's like one of the most beloved companies in the world. And they have the G4 computer system. My mom had one of these. And that was, I think, the last generation of the PowerPC chip inside of it. And then they went to Intel after that. And all of a sudden, if you bought an Intel computer, all of your software for the PowerPC was not compatible. And so, there was a quantum leap, but people eventually went along with it. How long are we going to hold on to kind of technology that's kind of older and not really keep moving the hobby forward?
Well, I do think that we do need to move on. Analog video is really limiting. There definitely need to be advances. The problem is we've seen the DJIs of the world not necessarily do it in the best interest of the community, and I don't think that they, in reality, move things forward. I don't think they did within limits, but now again, if they phase out their technology or just stop supporting it, then people are going to be stuck with stuff that doesn't work. The new Fat Shark goggles don't have analog inputs. Well, they don't even have an AV input line that so for all these people using 1.3 gear, and there are legitimate reasons to use 1.3 video gear, that you just can't. It's just not possible. So, that's the type of stuff that bothers me, is that, they want to make this leap. I don't think we have enough of a market base to just make a change and everyone just be able to do it. I think that it has to evolve, or it has to be open enough that people can still use what they have, and it's just, people just don't have that money. And, you talk about, potential recession and everything else. I think that's going to make it even harder for people to justify trashing what they have to buy something that is incompatible with what they have completely. There needs to be a bridge, something that gets us from one to the other.
Yeah, no, I just thought it's funny you said analog is limiting, because I actually see it the other way around. I see HD has got a very pretty picture, but apart from that, you are very limited with it. Partly because of technical limitations, so the length of a MIPI cable, you can't put your VTX out in a wing, for example. The cost difference is still, we're looking half price for analog compared to digital for in-plane setups.
For a high-end analog setup.
Well,
we are still talking half the price.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking at about £70 for an average analog setup, where you're looking 140 for 130, 140 for HD, because it's all like £40 camera, £80 VTX. But yeah, I see a lot more limitations in digital, especially the OSDs, where I know we have canvas mode now on HD0, and we have canvas mode on the new Fat Shark system, but from what I can tell, they're all designed around Betaflight, which is a very limited OSD in itself. And when you put the INAV full OSD on it, you find, like with HD0, it's very slow to update. Even there was a new update that came out last week or this week, and the Artificial Horizon, the update of the OSD elements is still really, really slow compared to analog. So I think they need to sort of learn from some mistakes. Like, they're still both rendering the OSD on the goggles rather than in the plane, and I think that's a big part of it. So I think the proper HD stuff will be the next generation. It will start to get better. Maybe we won't be so limited with what we can set up with it. In range, obviously, DJI, you've got a hard cut. HD0 is much better, but it still can't compete with 1.3. So
I guess when I say limited with analog, and I think we're limited as to any big leaps in forward in technology, but you're right. You know, like analog, I don't think is going to go much beyond where it is, but an open HD setup would allow people to work more on making sure that the OSDs are working properly. I think, yeah, that's a huge weakness of these, even with canvas mode, like you said. And it's been one of my issues right off the start with DJI is that, you know, you were stuck with what they gave you, and that's it. And then, you know, slowly added in support to get more and more information, but you still, you know, we went from, you know, even years ago, you know, with you know, Eagle Tree, and their OSD was honestly super advanced at, you know, at the time, you know, it was out, and all the features we had with that, and now INAV and all these other systems that have really well developed and user customizable OSDs and features and everything else. And in that case, yeah, we've kind of taken a step backwards. Yeah, the video is beautiful on HD systems, and that's tough to go back to analog if you fly, you know, much with just from the clarity of what you see. And that's, you know, but we're going to get there. I mean, the thing is, you have so many people that have this desire, and the technology is, you know, there's still new stuff coming out, and all it's going to take is the right things to be available for the hobbyists to start throwing stuff together. And, you know, the right people with the right background that will piece it together, and we'll have some, hopefully, more open standard. But yeah, I don't feel like what's available now is quite there yet, but it is great for what it is, you know, and it's so tough. You know, it's like, you know, personally, I don't fly with DJI. I've had some guys here that have, you know, it's great when you do it. But then again, you know, I can do so much more with analog. It's so you're right. When I said limited, I didn't really mean. Yeah, I mean you could do so much more. It was more limited advancement.
How much further we can push.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I agree with that totally.
Yeah.
But just for me, the scale hasn't quite tipped enough in digital's favor yet. Especially
analog. Also, you can get smaller. You know, none of these HD systems are that. I mean, HD or the HD0 has some smaller setups, but not nearly as small as what we have with analog, you know, and some of these really micro systems, you know, even putting an all-in-one camera on a Nano Goblin or something like that. I mean, you know, you just don't have that with the digital yet. It's getting better, but you know.
Funny story, on Friday I was the first time flying with Henrik, or with Grumpy Old Nerd here in the chat, and I had my AR Wing Pro with me that has an Caddx Rattle 2 camera in there and an Rush Tank Solo VTX, and I was flying, and he was on, I think it was on my second flight or so, he put his camera or his goggles on and went to my channel and said, wow, that's a really great picture actually. And he said he also I think he also just starts with HD0, and he said there is not much difference between a good analog setup and, for example, an HD0 setup, and you have the proper OSD. Of course, if you go a little bit further away, like I have slight fine lines as noise in the image, you won't have that with digital. Even the if you go to a little bit more of range and or behind obstacles, and the signal starts slightly to break up, you will have grizzle and maybe color shiftings on the analog system, where even HD0 is still stable before it starts to get blocky. Of course, there are advantages, but a good analog setup, and I mean the Caddx Rattle 2, it costs about 35 euros, I think, currently.
Cheaper than that. It's about 25 pounds, so maybe 28 euros.
Yeah, 28, 30 euros roundabout. And the Rush Solo is a 2.4 watts peak VTX. I think with proper cooling on the rings, it should output 2 watts or 2.1 watts continuously. And I mean, it's so small. It's like this size, like it's like half the size of an HD0 board, a bit thicker because of the heatsink housing, and it costs about 50 euros, the VTX, and it does a good job, and it looks good. And I remember back in the days when DJI was starting to become a thing, and a lot of people argue that, yeah, with the DJI digital, or in general with digital FPV and the higher resolution, if you do chase stuff, you can see other planes or other crafts, copters, whatever, you can see them earlier. That's not the case. That's absolutely not the case, because if I compare that with my analog setup, I did a few chases with analog already, and then I recorded the DVR and I put the 4K GoPro footage next to it. Often I saw the plane, when I watched the footage afterwards, I saw the plane earlier on the analog setup than of the 4K footage, because the 4K footage, or even the DJI digital cameras, also the HD0 cameras, they try to image or to reproduce the image as realistic and natural as possible, like with an HD camera, camcorder, action cam, whatever. But the analog system, because you have these high TV line counts, like I think the Cadix, the Rattle is 1,200 or 1,000.
Sounds about right.
600 TV. I think 1,200 TVL. They use that for to remove dithering, for example, and this actually causes that you get a little shimmer around small high contrast objects, or like a little halo. So actually small objects on an analog setup are blown up, while on the digital setup they keep small. So you see them, sometimes you see them earlier on analog than you see them even on an HD action camera.
Yeah, you talk about the differences too. It wasn't that long ago, I was going through, I found some old files of stuff that I had recorded way back when I had first started. So this was 900 megahertz. I had a ground station in a box on the ground, you know, with the antennas just kind of sitting there. And at that time I was recording the videos onto a mini DV camcorder. And we don't realize how bad every single one of our DVRs now are compared to that format, which is really essentially no compression, but also the mini DV actually does the proper interlacing on the video, so you're getting exactly what is coming from the camera. Those videos back from 15 years ago and 900 megahertz looked clearer than a lot of modern videos, and smoother, because they were essentially running at what appeared to be double the frame rate because of the interlacing. It wasn't holding one frame and to show the whole thing. So your eyes don't perceive the difference in resolution, but you perceive what is essentially, for in the US, 60 frame per second video for analog, what feels like 60. I was shocked how clear those videos were. I'm looking at this, I'm like, that was way better than I would have imagined. And again, not a single DVR comes anywhere close to that format, but you just can't really find anything to record in a mini DV format that's at a reasonable price that you're going to carry along with you. You know, the MPEG compression is great, but you lose the same interlacing, and you lose, you know, you lose some of that really changed that the ability to record. But I was shocked how clear those videos were 15 years ago. I would have said they almost probably did look as good as like the HD0 videos across the board. I mean, you know, because you have some loss in that setup as well. So
I mean, if you take some DVRs from today, we don't need to talk about Fatshark DVR. We know that's crap. Like from Skyzone, the 04X, or the Orca, or the Immersion RC Powerplay, for example. They do actually interpolate the 60 FPS out of the interlaced frames.
Okay, yeah, right.
They have the downside that sometimes, especially with the FR Sky Pixar OSD, the OSD is jittering at, I think, at 10 hertz, especially if you use PAL. And so the DVRs are better nowadays, of course, yeah. but you are absolutely right. In these camcorders, for example, you have much more post-processing, dedicated analog post-processing, and not just a screen grabber that compresses into MP4 or whatever it does. So all this extra processing, of course, makes more clarity, more contrast, better edges, for example, to avoid the dithering effects and all that stuff. The cameras have much more power than our cheap DVRs. That, I mean, one of these DVR chips. You can buy a complete DVR module that records 30 FPS from Banggood for 10 euros or so.
Right.
So
and also the cameras themselves, just the technology in the cameras have greatly improved in the analog cameras over the last 5 years, because the quad pilots are flying in from into the shadows, into bright sunlight. So there's probably 4 to 6 f-stop difference right there, and because of that, it needs to step down very quickly, within like half a second. You can't wait a second or two to go from f2.8 to f16. And so because of that, I also looked at some of the specs on the FPV cameras, and they're just amazing. It's just kind of like the broadcast, the number of lines that they call them TV lines, 1,200 TV lines. Some of these are really, for we getting $30-$40, pretty darn good. And that's, I think, what Mark is saying, is that you start to see, you get yourself a quality FPV camera, and you get yourself a really good BTX, you're going to get a quality output on analog.
I will say, Mark pointed out something that I'm glad he went where he did with the high TV line aspect and how it benefited the video, because it's been a pet peeve of mine, just ask the guys that work for me, of that when companies come out with saying that they've got a 1200 TVL camera, I just kind of shake my fist and go, yeah, bullshit. But that's primarily, you're not ever going to see that much resolution in your ground station on the analog video. That's usually tops out around 700 or so, that the electronics and analog video can handle of actually resolving. But what Mark said is right. Where they take advantage of that, the higher resolution, is the processing on the camera itself, to enhance or get things out of the picture, and that's where you get an advantage. We did, again, this is old school analog. There's some resolution charts you can use, and we've tested multiple systems, and maybe some of the newer analog systems have improved, but there's just a fundamental limit because of how analog is encoded, where you are not going to get any more than about 750 TV lines of resolution, horizontal resolution, out of an analog signal at your ground station. In other words, passed from the camera to your goggles. But the advantage is what the camera can do with it before it even sends it.
I just want to jump in here because there is still a discussion ongoing in the chat. For example, one point that Keith, Bonafide Pirate, brought up, that it would be better to have the OSD rendered on the VTX side. In theory and from a technical side, this is absolutely true, because you can get rid of the complete telemetry downlink to the goggles, and render them directly on the VTX. But on the other hand, take the freestyle VTX from HD0 that comes already in at 120 euros currently. Now imagine you have to add to every single VTX a complete video processing system to draw the OSD over the video. So you have to decompress it, draw the OSD, and then recompress it all on the VTX. They are already big, expensive, and generate a lot of heat. So I think this is a technical limitation why they still do it in the goggles.
I mean, that's a good point, because with analog video, they usually are just blasting it right over top of the existing analog signal, so it doesn't have to interrupt or delay the video at all. But with these digital systems, you've got to jump in the middle and insert it somehow. And if it isn't, so I can see that being a valid point. The question is, we like to be able to customize our OSDs to have the things we want. So what's the best way to enable that? Is it, I guess maybe have something open on the goggles themselves that allow that. It's an interesting point, though. Yeah, you are adding something to the video in that case.
Yeah, I mean, just for the explanation, I'm not sure if everyone knows how that works. These analog OSD chips are basically copied from old TV OSD overlays. And the only thing they actually do is why the analogs, because the analog signal is transmitted line by line, so you basically have an analog graph like an audio line that goes through every single line on the screen, telling the screen with the amplitude how bright every pixel and every subpixel has to be. And what this analog chip basically does is, at specific points during these this line graphs, it just peaks out a full white signal, white or black signal, drives it up and down digitally, and that's how they make the lines and the analog pixels. I'm not sure, it's actually not a pixel, but the specific points on the screen, how they draw them black and white just by raising or pulling down the signal at this specific timing. And that's how the OSD is drawn over the actual video feed without any delay or any interruption of it.
I was hoping that to get to one other topic before we can go on analog for probably the rest of the hour here, but you know, I think people got the point here that it's decent quality for now, and for myself, and I think most people, Mark and Darren, I know about Luke, we're sticking with analog until something better comes along from HD. Since Tim and I are both Americans, and so we speak about something that is not as big a deal in Europe, but what happens in the United States kind of sets the pace for the rest of the world. And that is, what's going on, do you think, with the future of the hobby with FPV and the FAA?
Man, I wish I had some kind of crystal ball. It's, you know, I've seen very little concrete changes in the U.S. as to what's coming. Your remote ID is still coming, but I still, even from our standpoint, don't know what that's going to mean when it comes to how we and our, you know, and the customers are going to be able to implement it on these things that we build generally from scratch. You know, most of remote ID is going to affect directly the DJIs of the world selling full UAS, full systems, you know, the radio, everything combined in a single system. And that's, the laws are targeted to them. And then we kind of were a side thought. And obviously there was a lot of controversy and discussion about the language they had, you know, about what needed to be included.
Right.
There's no way it's going to be, you know, something that can't be just removed from a plane. I mean, the way we build our kits and planes, it's going to just have to be an add-on module. And once there's enough technical detail of a standard, then someone's going to come up with it. Hopefully it's going to be easy to manufacture. We'll be able to kick those out. And it'll just be something that we, for those following the rules, we'll put in our aircraft, and that'll be done. The FAA would prefer that it's something that we can't touch and can't mess with, but it's not technically feasible for our kits.
Following this for a number of years now, and back in around 2016, the FAA was treating people who flew drones in particular as domestic terrorists.
Right.
It was what Congress felt about it and everything else like that, right? And now there's a guy who works for the FAA who's going on to a lot of the video podcasts, and he's going around talking like, you guys are pilots. We see you as pilots as well. We want you to participate in the sky. And it's happy talk, much different than it was a couple years ago. And there are some licensing, looks like there for beyond visual line of sight, where people are going to be able to fly planes. Of course, that's going to be mostly for commercial, but it looks like it will be for some of the hobbyists as well. It's not going to be pretty much most planes that we own. They're going to be very specialized planes that are going to be approved by the FAA. But the what I'm reading into this is that it looks like they're going to, well, there's a bigger problem, which is generally aviation right now is pricing itself out of existence. I mean, if we're paying, what, $6 a gallon here, $8 in Europe, somewhere $10 a gallon, you have to add a couple of $2 to $3 a gallon onto what it costs for aviation fuel. And it's not at all inexpensive. So they're looking at ways to get people flying. And I think that's where some of the interest is, because if people aren't getting general aviation licenses and there's no wars to get pilots trained, then, you know, there's a potential, which is what we're seeing right now, which is not enough pilots. Right now, they're saying that in the next 20 years, the United States is going to need an extra 160,000 pilots.
It's kind of interesting. We weren't talking about the plane cancellations earlier to lead to this, but it actually does. I mean, a lot of the shortages of pilots and stuff even now are a problem. And I think a lot of us in the hobby have been trying to tell the FAA that for a long time. It's like, you want to get people into aviation, drones, model aircraft are the way to do it at a young age. And yeah, like you said, a few years ago, drones were looked at like an evil, like we were all domestic terrorists. And it's good and bad that they finally now embraced us. It's to some level. The good is that there are paths now. There are legal paths that they've defined that allow us to fly both commercially or as a hobby. And that's good. The negative is it's bureaucratic and it can be overwhelming for new people. That's potentially the negative. I think that overall it's going to be good that there's going to be some definition. I do worry there's still people that are scared to death, and I think they've probably seen some of the stuff in Ukraine, and it's probably given them some reinforcement of the fact that drones can be used for things that in the wrong hands would be bad. A lot of technologies can be used that way. Obviously, a lot of us would argue that it's been good, but what we see and what is kind of cool, for some of the uses they've been used for over there, people would also be afraid of here because, the wrong things in the wrong hands are going to put that type of technology to use against people, So, I wish remote ID didn't exist as it eventually will be implemented, but I think that that's just how it's going to be. It's definitely has led to the FAA is starting to realize that they can embrace us a little bit more now. But it's just going to cause a lot of bureaucracy that's going to turn some people off and make it a little bit harder for people getting started in the hobby to do it legally.
But I see the positive side too, which is that you have, people, there's a lot of interest. We want to take our planes and fly further away. I mean, I would love, for example, to fly from my local airport out to Catalina, which is an island, and back. Mm-hmm. And there are technology, there are planes that we can do that with lithium-ion batteries. But there's all sorts of FAA regulations that be broken once I get outside of the area.
Exactly.
It's not at all possible. But if there's a way to do that in the future, and it might be something where these planes are pretty expensive and might have to belong to a club, and then you get like an hour or two to fly the plane, and everyone takes turns, and everyone kind of chips in to buy these planes in the future. And it might be much larger planes. These are things that probably quarter scale and above.
Yeah, I definitely think it's going to be good to have something in stone that allows us to do these things that everything we fly is capable of already to some extent. It's very easy for us to all fly it beyond line of sight. They don't like that at all now, even with the current rules. But yeah, they already are for commercial use, giving exceptions in many cases. We've worked with companies that have already had exceptions for stuff that's really even our hobby level stuff. But it's the FAA, and it's on a case by case basis. They got to get specific approval, potentially shut down airspace for other aircraft and stuff. But I do think it's going to continue to evolve. And I do think that it's the commercial side that's helping that now. There's so many companies flying drones commercially now that they have some level of lobbying available, and the stuff just kind of flows down to the hobbyists. Because pretty much everything we do now is involved with the business. We just got 107s here because the FAA could easily say anything we fly now is for the business, and it's, that process of getting a 107 is complicated, and that would scare the heck out of most hobbyists. So hopefully they won't ever go down the path of requiring that level of education and the requirements for the testing and so forth. I don't mind them having testing, but the level for the Part 107 stuff is, it's probably a third of the bookwork you would need to become a full-scale pilot.
But what they're looking at now is there's going to be something after the Part 107, so it's going to be beyond visual line of sight UAV pilots licenses you get which is kind of cool. Again, this is going back to most of the time it's probably not going to be something like some of the foam planes we fly, but this is at least there's a path forward, which there wasn't a few years ago.
Yeah, that's the big change, is that now they went from we don't want them in the air at all to let's figure out something, even if it's complicated, but some way of doing some of this stuff. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, there's some positivity over that.
Yep.
I
was gonna say I'm not. I think there was some kind of doom and gloom back when the remote ID stuff was really being pushed. And we've seen so many hits of, some of the things that they tried to do in the past were much more scary, really, when you look back at it in hindsight. They, potentially just wanted us out of the sky completely. Yeah. I think we're in a position now where I don't see them just grounding us. I don't see, so I do think it's a very positive future for us. I don't think remote ID is going to be anything that destroys the hobby. I think, in all honesty, I think as we get closer to it being implemented, I have a feeling that, and this is just a feeling, that it's going to potentially become just an easy part of what we do, and they may even pull back and begin to continue to embrace us even more than they already have, as they see what really happens with this stuff.
Because I understand that there were some people in the Department of Defense that their simplistic thinking was, I need to be able to look at a plane in the sky and know if it's a good guy or a bad guy. Okay, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But
I heard that they were the driving force.
Yeah.
It was mostly them, that especially right at the very end, that pushed the remote ID stuff. And the consortium of these companies, that are, the Facebook and Googles of the world, that were trying to do their own delivery systems, and I can't think of the name of the organization now they created. They were also a big push to try to limit us as well, primarily because they know that it's expensive to develop what they're doing, and hobbyists can do it a lot less. Hobbyists can figure it out and spend a lot less development money. So they were just pushing to make it harder for us to just be in the air and do some of this stuff. But the big push was, I heard the same thing. It was the DoD basically saying, we're a danger. They need to know what's in the air at all times, everything. And,
Of course, my reply back to them is, why don't you apply this to the cyclists first and then let us know how it works?
Right. Right.
So just forgetting all the FAA stuff, all the legal stuff, where would you like to see the hobby go in the future? Forgetting all the legal stuff, because at the end of the day, if they put too much emphasis on, people just say, sod you, I'm going to fly legally anyway. But anything you'd like to see in innovations, or to enhance our experience?
I mean, I think this merging, kind of what we talked about for a while before, this merging of being able to have some standards that we can all work on and develop is really the biggest thing, because that drives what new things that people want to come up with. If we're limited with closed source video, closed source technologies, it really prevents us from changing it. We're stuck with what we have. I still think things are going to continue to get smaller or stay small for lots of reasons. I think battery technology is going to evolve and continue to evolve. I think that, right now, even with shipping and everything else, lithium ion is difficult. but that's going to be driven by something other than the hobby industry. And any battery changes are probably going to come from the automobile industry or something along those lines. Again, we're riding on the shoulders of things that exist for other reasons. Yeah. I just think this evolution of what we have is really what I see. I don't see currently anything drastically different than what we're doing. It's just an evolution of what we're doing that's really going to drive things.
I guess I ask you by now, after like 2 shows with us, do you actually fly INAV planes?
I don't very much, and it's not a matter of me not liking INAV or something. I don't have time to build that kind of setup anymore. I actually been flying without flight controllers for the most part when I do fly, and it's because when I get a chance to fly personally, it's a matter of let me go out and just fly, and then I'm done. And the setup time and all that work that I will become totally obsessed with once I start diving into takes up so much of my time. I don't mess with it a lot. So no, I don't really right now because I'm not flying with any flight controllers really right now. It's
send us a Stratosurfer. We'll put one together for you and mail it back.
Yeah, and that's the funny thing is I've done that in the past here where I've had my guys build something for me and set it up. Right. Because again, I don't have the time. I want to fly it and use it, but I don't have the time to do it. Like I'm looking at my list of stuff that I need to get done here and things I got to, and I'm like, oh man, I really want to do that. I don't have time to do that. I've got these other 50 things I need to do. Here I am, messing with soldering stuff on a board or getting stuff hooked up, going through the interface and I will, and this has been in my nature forever, I will go full blown focus mode on it and realize that a day's gone by and I'm still sitting here messing with stuff. And it's what led me to where the hobby is, because that's, I think a lot of technical people do that. They just get zeroed in and the world disappears for a while. But yeah, so honestly, one of the things I would like to do is have, if we can get an inexpensive basic controller, is to have a Stratosurfer equipped with something that is kind of a basic, inexpensive INAV-based flight controller that we could integrate really quickly, make it super easy to plug in, but allow people to use it as a starter plane, kind of like our Recruit was, where, essentially not really there for all the OSD and all the major flight control, but just for stabilization, launch modes and things like that, but make it so that it's adaptable, that they can easily then start using that same thing to integrate into the video FPV system, integrate into navigation if they want to do that. That's something I really feel would be good, because the Stratosurfer is, it's a great aerobatic plane for advanced flyers. It works good, but it's also perfect for beginners because of how it flies as well. So if we can kind of merge that to me would be a great thing. That's just a matter of us either taking the time to set something up with an existing Maytech board or some other board. But again, Maytech makes good stuff, so I like to stick with them. And just getting it really just flashed with all the right settings right off the bat, and here you go, plug it in and go kind of thing.
Sure, do you have a question? Darren looks like he's zoning out. Darren, do you have a question?
I was sort of going to ask about last time you were on, you went into a little bit of detail about designing other planes that may be led on for the Goblin, but by the amount of time you've had free, I bet that's sort of something that's not really happened a lot.
They're sitting in this half-developed state right now, and it goes back to the where do we put money and invest. I think that it would be great seller, but the cost of getting over that hump is so high that we need to get the Nano Goblin in first. We need to get the Stratosurfer in. I know there are a lot of people that like the Goblin, but it's become such a limited. It's harder to fly. It's become such a limited market that the Goblin itself probably in the foreseeable future isn't coming back. This other version. We've got two other versions that are based off of that same wing style, plane style. Both would be better. like they would, there's one that's kind of medium-sized Goblin that would be maybe not quite as crazy fast as the Goblin, and would be, probably fully foam instead of having the blow molded fuselage. Would be flight characteristics a little bit closer to the Nano Goblin, probably. Well, yeah, still super efficient, but maybe not quite meant just for speed, because I think that getting that thing launched is the biggest problem for the majority of pilots. And then we have a prototype of a massive Goblin style plane. That one, it's going to be expensive, and that would put that to be used. I mean, of course, there'll be tons of hobbyists that want it, but I think we would have to find a commercial use for it as well. But you take that efficiency and put it up to something that's, got 3 times the wingspan of the full-size Goblin. It's a pretty, once it's in the air and it's great, it's going to be a beast to launch. But, we've got those 2 sitting there, half developed. Would love to see them move forward. Some big investor out there wants to, put some money into it. Great. But right now for us, we can't focus on those right now. I do want to do it eventually, but not right now.
Cool.
I was going to say, Tim, that, we love having you as a guest because, you share a lot of wisdom with us and past experience and have a lot of good ideas. So moving forward, though, there's a challenge here in front of you, which is you got the Stratosurfer, which is probably a pretty good plane for people who are just starting out with INAV. And we always get the question, I want to build an INAV plane. What should I start off with? Even if you had something that would at least have electronics somewhat, because these are blown fuselages, right? So putting the electronics inside of there would be, something that would easy enough to run the wires through and things like that. That's kind of a big enough challenge, and holes in the right place and all that. But that's a great plane for someone who's starting off. The mid-fuselage pusher planes, especially one that has a plastic fuselage so it doesn't break as quickly. And that's something that I think would get a lot of support for the group. So between now and the next time we have you, I'd love for you to move forward with that and start thinking about how we could put something together that would be good for, just for example, I wrote a document probably 2.5 years ago about how to put together essentially a ready-made RC recruit or an AR900. And the idea was that I was just kind of like, I showed people, I took photos of what I put together, and I did a quick write-up as to this is how you put it together, this is how you assemble it. And people are still referring to this document that was running INAV 2.4 at the time. So it's way out of date. We still have it up, and it's still one of those things that looked at. So if you have something that's geared toward a newer pilot, you are going to get people who are really going to embrace this. So this is a good challenge.
I agree. I mean, and that's, the recruit, that's one of the reasons we, use the AR wing and kind of develop that into the recruit. Unfortunately, that was a closed source flight controller that they won't let us touch any of the settings on. And now we can't even get those. So that's why that hasn't come back. But that's where I still, and we've had discussions here multiple times, is I still feel that the Stratosurfer is kind of, like you said, perfect for that. It flies well, and it would be super easy to put it in there. We've got the platform in there already for a flight controller. All we would really need would be to fly it and to make sure we've got the right settings and just save all those settings. And, here you go. Just flash this on to, buy this board, plug it in. Like you said, have a document that maybe gives you that basic instructions of running the wiring.
Website so people can download it.
Exactly.
Website as well.
Yeah, and we can work with you guys when we get there, and and even offer something special for the INAV group or something along the way. That we could whether we do a discount or something. Because I sound like a broken record, but that whole community aspect of it is where I still see the hobby continuing and growing. Otherwise it's just people out figuring stuff out for themselves, and
Yeah, this group really does move things forward in the hobby. I think we're kind of on that's what we're really strong at, moving things, good ideas forward. So,
Yep.
and speaking of moving things forward, I just wanted to mention that there's one person here who has an announcement to make as far as what's coming up on Saturday. That would be you, Darren.
That'd be me, would it? Okay. Okay, so yeah, in 6 days, all going well, INAV 5.0 will actually be out in a stable format. So at the moment, it's in release candidate. There have been no critical bugs. There have just been a couple of little things. And to be honest, I think the last release candidate was just to add something new. So, yeah, all going well, which...
It's important because you wrote pretty much half of the INAV 5, right?
I've made a lot of little changes in configurator. Yeah. I wouldn't say I don't do any of the important stuff, so it's fine. I've not broken it. But yeah. I mean, configurator, I've probably done a fair amount of work in. Done a couple of bits on the firmware.
And it's logical and it makes sense. That's the most important thing. You get in there and you can work away around now. There's not idiosyncrasies like we used to have in the previous INAVs because you thought through a lot of this. So we really do appreciate what you've done.
Yeah, I just look at it and think what could be done better. And it's like a lot of it is selfishness, to be honest. It's like I want it to work better, so I'm going to make it work better.
We're guys behind the scenes, doing stuff with the hobby. You are like the unsung hero of, I think, INAV and for a lot of the hobby, moving things forward. So, first of all, welcome back. I really do. I got very worried when you got COVID last time, and
that wasn't pleasant.
No. So you going to tell people about getting vaccinated?
Oh, I haven't yet. Yeah, so basically, if you obviously watched the last Wingtalk, you'd have seen I was in the chat, but that was about it. I was just making rude jokes at everyone else's expense. But yeah, I had COVID. I'm not currently vaccinated. The simplest way to explain it is needle phobia, but I don't actually have a needle phobia. It's a fear or something else. The psychiatrist explained it better, but yeah, I need to get vaccinated because I've got over that now. So that's one of my one of the things I really want to get done. But yeah, with regards to INAV, I just hope everyone enjoys it and finds the additions beneficial.
Also about INAV, Paul did mention that it's going to be a slower pace coming out with the newer updates. So INAV, the next big one might be 9 months instead of 6 months.
He's thinking about it, as far as I can tell. But to be fair, in this new version, there's not a lot of big changes. It's a lot of little things, but because of the way the version numbers work, that's why the jump from 4.1 to 5. Okay. So the fonts have changed and some CLIs changed, so it's no longer backwards compatible. But yeah, he mentioned in not the last stream, but I think the stream before, that the cycle may slow down, which makes sense. It'll give more time to develop, but at the moment it's not official. It's something that Pavel's thinking about. He did say 9 months. I think 12 would be better if we're going to slow it down, just because 9 months you're looking at a 3-year cycle, aren't you, for when things tie back up again. It's like at the moment it's summer and Christmas is INAV, whereas 9-month cycle, it's less predictable.
Right, I agree with you. And people kind of get, we discussed it before, the idea is that you probably wanted to come out around September or October time frame so that people can start playing with it. There's still weather's good enough to test some of the beta out. And then it's wintertime for 88% of the world, and then they get the builds done over the wintertime and have it. It's kind of hard to, have an INAV that you built all winter, and then all of a sudden you've got the next, not point X, but the next X coming forward. So INAV 5,
Yeah, my thought was most of the developers, I believe, are in sort of Europe. So over the summer, we could be developing stuff, testing it, and then around September time, maybe mid-September, that's when the release candidates come out. Maybe cut that off around November, then do a release early December. So then over the winter time for the northern hemisphere, we can build. Southern hemisphere will get it in the middle of the summer, but they can just update. But yeah, it was more important that most of the developers then had the summer to test stuff and iron stuff out. That was my thought behind it. And then sort of every December you have a release. But I need to run it past Pavel, see what he thinks.
Yeah, I mean, people are trying to keep up with it because I think people have multiple planes on INAV, and when they getting to the whole fleet, getting it up to INAV 4, then INAV 5 comes out, and that's kind of been that's the thing I've been hearing back from people.
But INAV 4's been out 6 months. What have they been doing? It came out in December. It's Christmas. It's winter.
Don't let them know that I'm still on like 2.5 on my most recent build.
And you haven't flown any of it for months.
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I think it will be better for people only having to update once a year. But already there's some cool stuff in the pipeline for 6 already.
All right.
So I'm excited about 6, and 5's not even out yet.
And it's top secret stuff, but we haven't even seen it yet. So that's good to hear. That it's what Powell said was like you thought that INAV was pretty much it's getting more and more fully baked now.
I think at the moment, when you look at the last few releases, it's been sort of small things, and I don't know if that's just because people are just sort of developing small things because of time or anything else, or whether it's because maybe they think 6 months isn't long enough to develop something, more at a deeper level, even though it could potentially run over a couple of versions. But I mean, there are some big things in INAV that do need sorting out. Me and Mark will agree the AHRS system could be improved. We do have Horizon Drift, which someone in the chat mentioned a few times, which it's not a trivial thing to solve, which people think that it is for some reason, but it's really not. The maths behind it is quite complex. So there are some bigger issues that could potentially be done, but again, it's down to the developers. I'm certainly not at that level to do that sort of stuff.
Yeah, we might have to get all our daughters to get the Girl Scout cookie uniforms back on and go out and sell stuff so we can get a fundraiser going to help pay for that Horizon Drift. We need about $100,000 to fix that, looks like.
It's not just that. It is having someone who understands the maths, understands the programming of INAV, understands how it all works. It's not a simple thing to fix, and Pavel's tried to say that quite a few times. It's not a trivial issue to fix.
Yeah, but that is something that is on the horizon, pardon the pun, that we're looking at.
But also, people are saying 2.4 didn't have it. Yes, it did. None of that code has changed.
Yeah, I really should add, I'm on 2.5, but not because of Horizon. It's just because I'm lazy.
Yeah. But no, you see it so many often. I think it was even in the live chat earlier on. But
yeah, it was the first.
I don't have Horizon Drift. The only thing that changes is the ignore rates in the defaults. The actual code behind it has not changed. So if you use those ignore rates on the new setup, it should be exactly the same.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward
Henrik's
to
already put up about fundraising. I think he's going to do a sponsored bike ride.
We need to do that. Have a fly in. Well, when we have Wing Fest, we'll pass them.
Yeah, when that happens,
we'll pass the hat around and see if we can collect $100,000 while we're there.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be. It's one of the bigger things we need to tackle. And up to this point, it seems like we've been fixing a lot of crucial issues with INAV, but now it's something that, I mean, when you first started with INAV, and I did as well, it was kind of like you installed it on your plane, and that was just the start. And then it was weeks and weeks and weeks of tweaking, and Mark wrote manuals so we can kind of figure out how to somewhat tweak these things better, and still, but nothing like it is now, where it's kind of, as long as you can build a decent plane, get it trimmed manually, the thing's going to fly. And it's going to seem nice.
If it's physically good in manual, it will be fairly, pretty decent with INAV. As long as there's minimal vibrations, nice clean electrics, and it flies well in manual, then it should all be fine.
Yeah.
And maybe that physical side of things has been sort of lessened, because we see a lot of like new guys who, for example, put their control throws at sort of 60 degrees, and the physical side of it, because they're putting a flight controller in, it's just, this will fix everything, and it really does need to be reinforced that it needs to fly well in manual first.
I really think we need to encourage you build it first without the flight controller, and then you put the flight controller in it. I don't think it's necessarily the best way to build a plane, but it ensures that it'll fly good once it's got the flight controller in it.
Oh yeah, definitely. But like you with 2.4, I'm too lazy to do that.
Yeah.
And then we also need to encourage everyone to go to Ready Made RC and order prop balancers.
Yeah.
That's something that people haven't been. Yeah.
What I'm using as a mic stand.
It's amazing how people just don't do that for the most part anymore, and it just makes such a big difference. I've always,
Yeah, I mean, we do every time that someone says I've got massive horizon drift, one of the first questions is, have you balanced the prop?
Yeah, you see their video and it's all.
Yeah. Why is everything going like this? It's like,
Fun fact on
300,000 subscribers. It has a video. He does RC planes and all the toys. And he had a big series he had a huge 2-meter plane that was made by Horizon Hobby, and in the video he showed the propeller coming off the plane with the motor and everything else, because he had such a problem with the propeller being out of balance that it caused the plane to crash. So, and that's what $20-$30 item that you're selling there at Ready Made RC?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's something that everyone should own, and you can't and that's a lot of the problems we have with why is my artificial horizon so screwed up.
Fun fact, on my AR Pro, I had for a while an 8x5 APC prop, a genuine APC prop that I had to balance, and I still had jello in my GoPro HD footage. Then I switched back to the original 8x5. I really bought a pack of original props from Sonic Model, and everything is smooth as butter again. So I don't have to, at least I don't have to balance these.
Well, you said that when Luke wasn't here, because he will debate you to the end of the.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
but even I mean, I'm a big fan of these German manufacturer props.
Graupner?
Not Graupner. Graupner from Germany, or Aeronaut, for example. Usually, when I bought them before, I had a lot of luck, so they were mostly fine. But recently, on my last order, I really had one that was so badly balanced. I had to send so much material on one side until it gets barely balanced that I was worried that it will break because it went so thin. So I think that was a production issue on that one.
Luke,
I don't think
you
you
were
got away
gone.
with that, Mark. I may have been out of frame, but I still heard.
He had a problem with an APC prop, a genuine APC prop, not a Gem fan clone.
I think the Sonic model props are actually made by Gemfan, as far as I know. At least they were in the past. I'm not sure about the AR Pro props right now, but they partner with Gemfan, so it makes sense.
You see the look that Luke is giving. He's like shaking his head, and he's like, "It's a one-off, right, Luke?"
Yeah, it's one-off. It's a fake, genuine one. It's something.
Well, with that, I think we're done for today. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on Wingtalk. We'll look forward to seeing you again next month. I really do want to thank Tim for being here and spending part of Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, Tim.
Thank you.
And
rest of the fathers out there.
Yeah, happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there.
Yeah, happy Father's Day.
You know, this is it. So, Darren, Luke, Mark, thank you for being here. Sorry we had issues with the camera. We're going to look forward to seeing you again next month. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.
Hey, everybody.
Bye.